Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome back to The Blue Dot podcast, where we give candidates across the bluegrass a platform and our listeners a front row seat to learn who they are and what they stand for. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Natalie McDonald.
And I'm Brian Kale. Today, we're joined by a name many Kentuckians already know, an Edgewood native, veteran, a mother, and now a candidate for United States Senate, Amy McGrath. Amy, thanks for sitting down with us.
Hey, great to be with you today.
Awesome, Amy. Well, let's dive right in. You joined the Blue Dot last year, but for those who may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your campaign.
So I'm a Northern Kentuckian and spent most of my adult life in the United States military and met my husband along the way. We have 3 amazing kids and we live right here in Northern Kentucky. I'm somebody that my life has been defined by protecting our country and defending our country and serving and service. And I've been very much impacted personally by our healthcare system and the sort of not so good part of that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. You know, just in the last month or so, my kids, I've spent a lot of time in the emergency room and in the doctor's offices, urgent cares. My oldest son has been battling with flu. My middle son broke his arm. And, you know, I've had some time to reflect on the fact that, you know, we're sitting in these waiting rooms and we're fortunate because of my husband and I, our military service, we are able to have insurance through Uncle Sam. And there's a lot of parents out there who, you know, if their kid breaks their arm, they're worried, how am I going to pay for this? You know, and if their kid gets sick, they're having to figure out, do I take them to the doctor or do I wait this out? You know, and that's just like, because the prices for everything have gone up so much, this affordability piece really hits our healthcare hard. And it just reminds me of the fact that our system is really not in a great place and that there are so many people that should not have to make that decision, you know? So that's ultimately why I'm running for office, because we have to fix this. It's hurting so many Kentuckians. We know that so many Kentuckians have lost their health insurance or their premiums have skyrocketed. Here in Northern Kentucky, there's a nurse I know who her premiums have gone to $1,400 a month. I mean, it's unaffordable, right? And it's unfair. And so you can sit there and say, well, nothing's ever going to change. What? I'm not that kind of person. I'm somebody that's like, oh no, we can change this and we have to. So ultimately, that's the main issue for me and why I'm running for office again.
Well, you know, Amy, I have really good insurance for my employer and it went up $850 from last year. So it's crazy. And now we're seeing not only the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid and the clinical research, but also these hospitals that are closing in Kentucky. And people are now resorting to GoFundMe pages. And we're seeing that everywhere. I've donated to my friends. I have 4 friends battling cancer right now. 4. And, you know, even with insurance, the healthcare cost of that is just exploded. It's not.
It has. And there's a lot of people, let's be real, there's a lot of people that have fallen through the cracks who don't even have insurance. You know, I know of a 60-year-old teacher in Central Kentucky who had worked all of her life, full-time, all of her life in teaching. She had a new position as a teacher's aide, and she was new to that position so that the insurance hadn't kicked in yet. She had a stroke on the job.
Oh, man.
And she was in between health insurance coverage, and she was trying to go into a rehab center, and no rehab center would take her, because none will take her without insurance. She did the right thing her whole life. She didn't fail at anything. The system has failed her. And there are so many tragic stories just like this across Kentucky and across the United States in our country. And we gotta fix this. We can't just say, well, there's nothing we can do. No, this is a choice. This is a choice.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us who would say that, you know, why can't we have health care provided by Uncle Sam for everyone? You know,
well,
it's
That's one of the
It's
things I'm so glad you brought that up, Brian, because that's one of the things that I've been talking about. When people say to me, well, Amy, what are you going to do in the United States Senate? Well, okay. But when it comes to when it comes to healthcare, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that we claw back everything that we lost in this big, ugly bill that throws people off of
absolutely.
Medicaid, that jacks up the Affordable Care Act, or takes away the Affordable Care Act subsidies, that puts 35 of our rural hospitals at risk. We're gonna fix that, but then we can't stop there. We have to go beyond, because that teacher I told you about in Woodford County, that her story is because our system is broken. So we have to go beyond that and we fix it. And how do we do that? One of the things that I really like doing, or like talking about, because I think we can do it in this country, is a true public option. And that's the idea that you would have an Uncle Sam option to buy insurance through Uncle Sam, the way Eric and I, the way my husband and I are able to buy for our family. I think everybody should have that option. Right now, you have the option of whatever plan your company has, or you can go on the private insurance exchanges and buy through you should have an option of a public plan. And that way, Brian, if you're somebody that isn't afraid of the government, you can buy it. But if you are, and you don't want to deal with the government plan, hey, you go get your Blue Cross, Blue Shield, private, whatever.
Right.
I think Americans like options. This would bring the price down for private insurers because they would have to compete with Uncle Sam.
Right.
So these
Right.
are solid things that we can do, and we can do it immediately so we can get coverage to that teacher, in Woodford County, and affordable coverage for the nurse in Northern Kentucky.
No, I was going to say, but if these options are good enough for our veterans and for the people in Congress, then it should be good enough for all American people to have that as an option, for sure.
Yep,
Well,
100%.
and a lot of people I talk to say, oh, the government, bureaucracy, option, et cetera, et cetera. It would be super expensive and super inefficient. And my initial response is, yeah, so it's really good right now. I mean, we don't have that happening now. It's not expensive now. It's efficient now.
Right.
Let's try it, and let's learn from the past and improve it. And I
Yeah.
do love the idea of giving people options. It's one of the challenges we have are these are entrenched policies from entrenched politicians. And you ran against one of those really entrenched politicians last time, Mitch McConnell, but he's not in the race this time. It's a completely different race and a very different national climate. So why is now the right time to get back into the race? Besides healthcare, what else is driving your desire to serve?
Well, for me, I've always felt like Kentuckians deserve someone who's ready to fight for them on day one. And this is exactly what I've done my entire life in the military. And then in politics, I have spent my life serving the country, stepping up when the missions are hard and tough. And then in politics, as you mentioned, Brian, I have run before, and I have gone toe to toe with Mitch McConnell. I gave him a run that he has never had to really compete here in Kentucky. And we made him do that. And I have stood up to Washington insiders with my own party. Okay. I know what it takes to run a campaign that can truly compete here in Kentucky. I have run two of the strongest grassroots operations Kentucky has ever seen. I know how to get the resources to take this fight on. And I think most importantly, I have the backbone to take on, things like the tariffs that hurt our farms and the bourbon industry, and to protect the backbone to protect rural healthcare. I mean, these Republicans in office right now, they know this stuff is hurting Kentuckians, but they don't have the guts to stand up to this president. Okay. I will stand up to this president. I will stand up to anyone in the other party or my own when it comes to protecting Kentucky's veterans. My loyalty is to Kentucky and Kentucky only. And so, that's the sort of why me and why now. Look, man, Brian, the stakes are too high, okay, for our country right now. The balance of the Senate is on the line, and it runs through Kentucky. This is an open seat. We have a unique opportunity right now. We don't get an open seat every couple decades. All right. And we have a unique opportunity to fill this open seat with someone who shares our values. Washington has broken promise after promise on things like lowering prices and on healthcare and protecting veterans. And we all know what's happening in our country is so dangerous at the moment. We've got to go after this seat. So for me, I'm somebody, look, I have run races before. I have been knocked down. Look, you don't stay down. You get back up. You get back
That's
up
right.
when your country needs you, when your state needs you. That's what I've always done. And that's what I'm doing right now.
And I mean, you did have the other campaigns that you ran, but what I think is amazing is that the time in between those races, you never stopped working for Kentucky or democracy. You started the American SOS Project. You have Honor Bound, among other things. So even when you weren't running, you were still running for what you believed in, and you were still serving. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about those other
Sure.
projects that you were involved in and you're still doing. You're still out there doing it.
Yeah, and so I get this question a lot since I've run for office again here. Is what have you been doing in the last 4 or 5 years? Since you ran against McConnell 6 years ago, I have been doing a lot. And when that race against McConnell we didn't win here in Kentucky, but that really mattered. And even prior to that, a lot of the resources that I worked to get to go after Mitch, we helped our governor here get into office because we were able to move a lot of our resources over to the party, the Kentucky Democratic Party, in order to get Governor Beshear across the finish line in his first election in 2019. I'm really, really proud of that. Okay. And then after my race, even when the Senate Majority Leader or Minority Leader at the time, Chuck Schumer, had said, well, it's going to be very hard to win those 2 races in Georgia. Whatever I had left over, Natalie, from that race, I rolled over to those Georgia races because you remember in 2021, we had a runoff in Georgia for those 2 final seats. And that really mattered for our country. And I always say, we may not have defeated Mitch McConnell, but we made him the Senate Minority Leader that year because we made him work in Kentucky. And we also used our resources here in Kentucky and all of the momentum we had, and we shifted it all to Georgia for that runoff. And that was huge. And then, of course, I woke up that morning, everybody on my team very excited. That was January 6th, 2021. And in the afternoon, we all know what happened. And at that point, I realized, all right, I'm not done. I'm going to keep working behind the scenes to make sure that we elect pro-democracy candidates around the country. I'm going to work in 2022. I worked on Secretary of State races around the country. These are usually down ballot races that a lot of people don't maybe care about or don't know about. But at the time, Donald Trump was trying to insert election deniers in key states, and we defeated them all and using our resources. That was amazing. And then we went from there to help people Honor Bound PAC, which helps women who have served start to run for office. And in addition to all of those things behind the scenes politically, I've taught at UK, which is something that I really love doing, teaching national security policy and defense statecraft to graduate students there. And being on the boards of, the Governor Beshear appointed me to the board of Kentucky Veterans Trust Fund Board, which was quite an honor. And President Biden appointed me to the board of visitors at the Naval Academy. And then beyond that, coaching my kids in baseball and softball and soccer. I coached all 3 of my children, which was something I always wanted to do, and I did. And now they're older, and they don't really want me as coach, which is fine.
They're getting to that age where they're like, okay, like, Mom, I need the other coaches here. It's understandable though, right? So then you're not emotionally tied to it. You could just sit back and watch them develop and grow. Right.
Yeah. In my oldest, he's 13. He plays soccer and he plays competitively, and he's really good. But I played soccer. I'm not arrogant, but I played Division I soccer in college.
Oh.
So when he gets in the car after a game, I'm usually kind of silent, and then he'll just he'll say, "Mom, right? Tell me what you think, but don't tell me that much." Okay, like he just doesn't. He's like, I don't want you to be my coach. I want you to be my mom. And I'm like, okay, so I can do that. So I kind of have learned.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. I was basketball coach for a short period of time for one of my sons, and I was a terrible coach, but all the kids liked me. So I consider
That's why
my,
you were a terrible
that's,
coach. You were too nice.
yeah, exactly. I had all the wrong priorities.
Yeah.
So, Amy, there's, healthcare is obviously one issue that you're passionate about that we've discussed, and the Democrats are really driving the affordability, the kitchen table topics, which we see as the economy, healthcare, infrastructure is obviously one, and then obviously our liberty, democratic freedoms. What's going on with ICE and immigration. So,
Yeah.
with all of these out there, and you just kind of mentioned what are you going to do when you get in there. What
Mhm.
are your other top priorities, or what's really driving you right now that says this is something we have to really get on top of as soon as possible? I mean, I know there's a
Well,
long list.
yeah, no, there is. So we talked a little bit about healthcare, and that I think that's the number one. But I
Hmm.
hear from almost everybody I talk to around the state, um, their prices are higher. It is the
Right.
cost of living is higher. I talked to a young woman just about a week ago who said, I got a raise. She's about 30, 35, single mom. She's like, I got a raise. I'm actually getting a higher salary right now than I did, 10 years ago or 8 years ago. But I'm having a harder time making ends meet than I was 8 years ago because all the cost of everything has just skyrocketed. So her paycheck, and this is true for so many Kentuckians, the paycheck just doesn't go as far. People are trying to figure out, how do I make the rent? How do I pay for groceries? And it, a lot of the policies that are being pushed down from Washington right now, particularly with the tariffs, don't make things better. They make it
Oh yeah.
worse. And I always tell people is we didn't vote for this. These guys in power right now are not focused on these issues. They're actively making life worse for all of us. Okay. As I mentioned, we're looking at 35 rural hospitals directly about ready to close directly because of this bill that these guys just passed. But the tariffs hurt all of us. It is a tax paid by Americans. Okay. And it hurts us at the checkout. It hurts our signature industries of bourbon. It hurts our farmers. And so when people say, well, what will you do? Well, let's repeal that. Those across the board tariffs. I know the Supreme Court just came out with a decision, but you know what? This administration isn't following what the courts are saying.
No, exactly.
They haven't done that at all. You know, the Congress passed a law signed by the president to release the Epstein files, and they haven't even done that. There is no indication that this administration is going to follow what the courts say, sadly, and that's going to hurt all of us. The only way to repeal these tariffs is to flip the House and the Senate and get people in Congress who are willing to actually do their job. Because, by the way, in the Constitution, it says Congress is the entity that is supposed to impose tariffs. I think they're stupid. They hurt our friends globally. They hurt us at the checkout. The Republicans did not bring down the deficit or the debt. They did all of this, and they cut taxes for Elon, which made our deficit and debt, increase. So
Yeah.
end these stupid tariffs that are a tax on all of us, and that will help and bring down the price of healthcare. Okay. Those are the two things that I really think will help everyday Kentuckians start to make ends meet a little bit more.
Yeah, and there's two things kind of wrapped up in that. First of all, is that they're sidelining the Constitution, they're sidelining the Supreme Court and Congress, which is a whole other issue with how democracy is being chipped away at. So that's a whole nother problem, right? And speaking of the affordability, what you're saying is it sounds like, I mean, the American dream is getting harder for people across the board.
Yeah.
And I think that those are really the core of what's happening right now, democracy and losing the American.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do, like you said, to fix that? And clearly it's getting those seats back.
Well, it is. Ultimately, it's the 1% of the 1% that are the richest of the rich. And we have a president and Republicans that literally, in everything that they have done since they have been in office, is to reward the richest of the rich with more yachts. I mean, that's what they've done. And they have slashed healthcare, taken it away from people. They have jacked up the prices on everything with these tariffs. This week we had the State of the Union address, and I don't know if you watched it, but There was a moment in
I
there where
did.
the president said, and all the Republicans stood up and clapped, where the president said, we have taken 2.4 million Americans off of food stamps.
Yes.
And
I
everybody
saw that.
claps. Everybody claps for that. And he said, well, they haven't lifted these folks off. They haven't done that. They've just cut it for
Right.
the most vulnerable people in our country. Our kids' school lunches, they're all clapping for fewer school lunches. It made me sick. And so to
Absolutely.
me, we're all to reward Elon and people like him. Enough is enough.
I
Yeah.
watched that. I was texting Brian, like, and I was like, I'm literally sick to my stomach. The assault on everybody in that room, on Democrats, on immigrants, it was just horrifying to see a president stand up there and say this.
Yeah.
I swore I never sit through a Trump speech. I'd never have. I swore I can't say anything if I don't sit through it. So I sat through the entire thing. But as I told Laura, my wife, the other night on the phone afterwards, I had to get up and walk around the house because I couldn't watch the screen when this guy was saying that stuff. And I was screaming out things like, oh my God, like when he said what you just mentioned, Amy, the people outside were hearing me inside. They were probably wondering what was going on. It's the only way I could get through it. But
Yeah.
the fact that he is spewing lies is bad enough. But then that Republicans are standing up and cheering for that, it was sickening. It was dystopian.
Yeah, it was dystopian. And the other big lie, I mean, he tripled down on the tariffs, but the other big lie was this notion that if Democrats win in an election, they did it fraudulently. And the only way, this claim that the only way Democrats can win an election is by cheating. And he didn't just say that, Brian, and everybody just kind of listened. He said those things, blatantly false things, dangerous things to say in a democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And all the Republicans stood up and clapped.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, that really took me back to, I was like, wow. You're just undermining the very fundamental piece of our democracy.
Absolutely.
It is 100% lie that our democracy is fraudulent. Our elections are, not fraudulent.
It's the projection is almost too amazing to fathom, especially I thought when he announced J.D. Vance was going to lead this council against fraud or something, the most fraudulent person in government standing right in front of him. I mean, again, it's all projection. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we could go down that hole forever, but why don't we, with a little bit of time we got left here, let's bring it back around. If you want to Northern Kentucky, kind of bring it locally here and back to Kentucky. Northern Kentucky is exploding with growth. The airport expansion. We're going to have the Brent Spence Bridge project finally. But with that comes growing pains of, again, housing, affordability, and traffic. So, getting a little more local when you're out at Kroger or picking up your kids from school, what are you hearing from your neighbors that isn't making it into the national headlines? Are there specific Northern Kentucky issues that you're going to carry to Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, and I think Northern Kentucky is very similar to a lot of other parts of Kentucky. And so what I hear from people, and a lot of almost all the stories that I told you earlier are from Northern Kentucky. The young woman who said, "Hey, my paycheck just isn't going as far." The nurse that I told you about, whose premium, she's lost the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act for Connect. That's all up here. And so what I'm hearing from people is the very things that I'm running on with, fixing our healthcare system, trying to get prices down in whatever way. But I think, what's interesting about Northern Kentucky is we have the same population number as like Lexington. But because there's not one city, it's a lot of different ones. We're not always in the mix when people talk about things.
Right.
So, I would love to, when was the last time Northern Kentucky really had, somebody in the Senate? I mean, it was probably Jim Bunning, I guess. But I would love to, and I say this because a lot of grants sort of federal funding that comes down. Some of it comes to the bigger cities, and a lot of times, if you're in Northern Kentucky, you don't always get some of that stuff because we have many. So I think one of my jobs as a U.S. Senator would be to really look at that and make sure that all areas are equally getting some of the assistance that we deserve.
Yeah, it would be great to be able to kind of somehow collate that together to be able to apply for some of those grants as a region versus, a municipality.
Right.
Link
Right.
NKY just had a big write up. It was like 3 pages of exactly that. Like, what
Mhm.
would happen if Northern Kentucky was treated as
Mhm.
like a one
Yeah.
entity,
Yeah.
right? So it's a
Yeah.
really interesting concept, but it only makes sense.
It's really important, and, like, Lexington is one county, it's
Mhm.
Fayette County, everybody thinks
Mhm.
of Lexington, and there's advantages to that. And Northern Kentucky being broken up in many different cities and many different counties really, sometimes puts Northern Kentucky at a disadvantage. So, like, look at that. That's one of the things I would definitely, wanna pursue.
Yeah, and we do have to. We talked a lot about what your goals are. There is a primary there. It's a crowded field. So
Mhm.
we have Charles Booker, Pamela Stevenson's running, Logan Forsythe's in the game. Talk a little bit about what sets you apart from them, and what do you plan to do to kind of unite all the blue dots in Kentucky and make this happen?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier about sort of why me, why now, I'm somebody who's always stood up when there's a tough fight. And I think what sets me apart from many of the other candidates is I will be ready on day one. You don't have to train me. I've been working at the federal level. I know how to get things done in Washington. I've worked at the political level there, my military experience. And boy, don't we need some people in this U.S. Senate right now where we're at the brink of war with Iran, who's actually knows what's going on the international stage? I
That'd be
mean,
great.
of all of the candidates in this race, to include the ones on the Republican side as well, with the exception of one on the Democratic side, I'm the only one that has any experience in international foreign policy, national policy. But ultimately, I want my kids to live in a country where leaders can be respected again. And people need to know I will protect healthcare. And it's about helping people. I know how to put together a team, Natalie, that can take on the most powerful. I've done it before, like Mitch McConnell, in an actual race, a competitive race. Okay. And to be able to win this open seat. All right. And I will build a coalition to do that. I think any Democratic nominee for this seat, if we're going to be competitive in the fall, has to be able to talk not only to and listen to and hear Democrats, but also in Kentucky, you have to be able to talk to and listen to and hear moderates and independents. You will not win with just Democrats alone. And so I'm somebody that can do that. When I ran for the 6th congressional district, I ran 12 points better than the average Democrat that year. When I ran against Mitch McConnell, I ran 8 points better than the top of the ticket of Joe Biden that year. And that tells me that I already know how to build a coalition. And so with that, that's why I feel like right now at this time, with all of the dangerous stuff going on in our country, with this open seat, I'm the best positioned to be able to become the Democratic nominee for this seat. I hope that answers your question.
It does. And what really hits home to me is when you said that we need to have our legislators and leaders be respected again. I think people across the
Absolutely.
spectrum, we've had 10 years of hateful rhetoric and division. And I think that
Mhm.
people are craving unity.
Yeah.
And character matters. And I think it matters a lot. And I think that I know that I just want to get through this so that we can look to our leaders and say, my kids can look up to that person.
100%. I mean, when
Yep.
Andy Barr's commercials and
Oh my
these guys
gosh.
Oh,
come on, I'm like, I don't want my kids to watch it.
I
I'm not
know.
proud of them. I don't want them to listen to the president of the United States.
That's
He
terrible.
has yeah, it is terrible.
Who would have ever
He is
thought?
not somebody that I want my kids to emulate.
Not at all. Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not. Oh, well, I'm gonna switch over to something positive before we let you go.
Mhm.
And we've done this once with you before. We do a lightning round with all of our guests. Do you care if we do it with you again? Because it's just fun.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. You talked about how you were an athlete. I say once an athlete, always an athlete. Coming off the Olympics, if you had the chance to excel in one Winter Olympic sport, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. This is so hard because I like them all. And I really like the story of the figure skater. I'm not a figure skater and nor would I ever want to be. But Alyssa Liu, the figure skater, I don't know if you know her story. It's truly American. She inspired the heck out of me. I could never do that. But I love I don't know if it's called the biathlon, but it's where they cross country ski and then they shoot.
Yeah.
And then they go back to skiing. I just think that is the coolest.
That's cool.
Not only does it's one thing as an athlete to be able to, use your body and go fast and all of that stuff. It's another thing to do all of that and then to calm yourself down and have the discipline to be able to hit the bullseye. That's cool. That's like fighter pilot cool.
That's
that's where it's like this combination of like, discipline and calmness, but also fast and strength. Love it.
That I think exemplifies you a lot. So that's though I watch the one sport that I watch is that when I look at the cross country skiing, I'm like, that to me is the last thing I would want to do. It's so hard.
Have you ever done it?
So hard. I have cross country skied when I tried to get to a ski lift. Right? Like,
it's not the same.
It's hard enough.
It is hard.
It is
Eric
hard.
and I did it once because I've always wanted to do it. And it's very hard, but it's enjoyable. You do get to look around.
Anyway, this may not be applicable, but we'll see. When you were flying your FA-18, did you keep with you like a trinket or a good luck charm in the cockpit or anything?
I wouldn't call it a good luck charm. I did have on my combat missions, I always flew with a couple of items. One was like a scapula, Catholic, and it was something that I got when I was a teenager and kept, and it reminded me of home and it reminded me of my dad and my mom and just everything that I loved in my faith, and I didn't really completely understand all the blessings associated with that particular thing, but it was something that I knew I felt like I was protected in some way. And I know it is what it is. And then I also kept in my pocket an American flag. It was small. It was about the size of maybe your palm, half your palm. And because when you fly in combat, you take off all of your stuff. You don't have any patches that identify who you are or what unit you're in, or even that you're in the Marine Corps or the Air Force or for the United States. Everything is kind of stripped off so that if you have to eject, you're not, the only thing that they can tell of you is your dog tags. And so those things were kind of things that I probably shouldn't have had on me because, they tell you not to have anything other than your dog tags, but they were important to me. The American flag reminded me of just why I'm here, protecting this country. I'm purely American, will forever be.
I did not know that. And thanks for making me tear up a little bit during my podcast. That's awesome. All right, here's a little bit something a little more lighter on a nice, beautiful Saturday morning, unlike the one we woke up to today. Do you find yourself at a farmer's market down in Covington, or you find yourself on a hike in Nauvoo or something like that?
Definitely a hike. I have 2 dogs. We have 2 dogs, the family, and I love probably more than anything taking them on hikes. And the only problem is at certain times of the year, they get really muddy. And then we also have to worry about ticks.
Yeah.
So, but, we power through that and the dogs just love it. And it's a wonderful thing to do.
Just spray them down when you get home?
I have sprayed them, but sometimes my one dog is a 2-year-old golden retriever and she loves water. And so if you spray her down though, and you don't like towel her off right away and put her in the house, she will run in the mud and in the yard and like try to dry off by like rolling around in the mud again. So there's that. And then the other one is our almost 6-year-old, 5.5-year-old yellow Labrador retriever. And he's He doesn't like water at all. So if you spray him, he just looks at you like you're torturing him.
It's the opposite that a lab should do, right?
I know. I'm
Just
like,
like
are you
water.
really a Labrador retriever? You don't like water? What's wrong with you?
Imposter, Amy. You got an imposter. Alrighty. So speaking of animals, this one's kind of a hypothetical. If you had to choose one person or pet household aside from your husband, he's not allowed to be in this equation, to run your campaign, who would it be?
That's
And
tough.
the only reason I said not Eric is because if you were going to exclude him anyway, then you're off the hook a little bit. You don't have the pressure to say Eric.
Well, I'm going to say, and I'm going to probably get in trouble for this, but I'm going to say my youngest daughter, who's 9.
Oh.
I have, a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, 2 boys, and they're lovely and wonderful. But my daughter is very organized, and she is on top of things. I never have to ask her if she's done her homework. She is only 9. But I would trust her to get things done. Being a girl, women, we get things done.
Yeah. If you want to get it done, if you want to get something done, assign it to a woman. That's all. I'm the first to admit it.
Alrighty. And last one, bring it back to Northern Kentucky. Again, when you were stationed away from home, what's the one thing you missed most about Northern Kentucky?
I think the people. I mean, I know that sounds whatever, but I loved coming home. I loved the fact that when I was gone, everybody here would write me letters and emails and just I can remember getting manila folders of just grade school kids from Northern Kentucky that would write me letters when I was overseas. And I just this is such a great area, and it's about family and it's about people, and that's what I love about this Northern Kentucky.
Amen. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining us, and we're excited about having someone of your character and experience potentially representing us at the national level in the Senate. That I think would be a wonderful thing and beneficial for all of Kentucky and the U.S. Can you tell us where people can find more information about your campaign and how to get involved?
Yeah, I always say people, this campaign isn't about me. It's about all of us. We all have to do our part. This is a real opportunity for Kentucky. And if people want to get involved, amymcgrath.com, they can get involved. They can support the campaign. They can volunteer, and they can spread the word, because it is about all of us taking this seat and filling it with our values of faith and family, and sticking up for our fellow Kentuckians in our Commonwealth. So amymcgrath.com is where you can go. That's what we need.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Have a great day.
Appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Amy. And thank you all for joining this amazing candidate interview. And don't forget, you can join the conversation at our Facebook and Instagram pages or at bluedoutpodcast.com. Until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, and never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everybody.